Welcome back to Coffee with the Authors, where we help you decode the craft and business of writing. In this episode, we're going to talk about something that plagues all of us at one time or another.
She's referring to what we call the sagging middle. There's a lot of names for it, but basically it's that middle section of the novel where you just kind of grind to a halt. And that can stop a lot of us. We don't know where we're going. It can actually make you kind of give up. You get to maybe page 100 and you're kind of like, I don't know where I'm going. I've lost my energy. I'm not sure what's going on. We have both fought that more than once. So we're going to try to share some tips that have worked for us and hopefully might work for you also.
I would say the number one thing to help you avoid the sagging middle is to fully develop your main character and maybe expand on your, secondary characters. So if you find that you're at page 100 and all of a sudden you've lost steam, or it feels like your plot is a plot to nowhere and you're just kind of desperate for what to do next, I would say take a look at your character, your main character, and decide, are they fully formed? Do they have, what's their home life like? What's their work life like? What's their school life like? What are other things that they have going on in their world? And maybe you haven't developed those. Maybe there's something that you can go back and give them a job if they don't have a job. I have talked about this before, but in the SAMMY KEYES mystery series, I have 18 books in that series. And in almost every single one, there are 3 plot lines. There's the home life where Sammy's living is a bad situation. There's the school life, which can also be a bad situation because she has a nemesis there. And so her home life, her school life, and then there's the mystery. And all of them contribute to the moving forward of the plot. So one thing will happen here, and then something will happen there, and they all move together to further the plot.
Another thing that's really helpful is just to decrease exposition. In other words, you don't want to do a whole bunch of telling. She did this, and then she did this, and then this thing happened, and that thing happened, and she felt like this, and he felt like that. You might think that speeds it up, but that actually slows the pacing in the sense that because it lessens the interest that the reader's going to have. So if there are some interesting things that are happening in the middle of your storyline, show us those in scene. Take your character, put them in the middle of the scene. Start maybe in the middle of some action piece, maybe in the middle of some kind of conflict, even if it's not the main conflict, and show your character going through that scene and resolving that conflict, or maybe not resolving that conflict. Try to decrease excess exposition, because too much of that at once, especially in the middle of a long story, can feel boring and your reader can lose interest. You're much better off to actually take a small thing and zoom in on it and spend a little time with it. It might feel to you like you're spending a lot of time with it, but then you go back and read it, and those 5 pages that took you all day to write, you read them in 5 minutes and they actually move pretty quickly because we're in scene. You don't actually want to tell a story. You want to show the story to the reader by painting scenes that they see in their mind's eye, almost like they're watching a film.
Another thing is, when you're writing, leave yourself open to unexpected developments. Sometimes a character will appear, and I tell a story about a pig that appeared in one of the SAMMY KEYES books. I wasn't expecting a pig to appear, but there was the pig. And the pig was being walked by an elderly woman down the side of a road. And once the pig appeared, it was like, what's this pig doing in my story? And I could have just said, oh, that's nonsensical, and not gone with the pig. But my motto is, go with the pig. See where the pig takes you. I mean, the pig can take you somewhere good, or it can take you off, sniffing for truffles somewhere that's not furthering the plot at all. And if that's the case, then you have to get the pig out of the story. But usually there's a reason your subconscious put a pig in the story. Mm-hmm. So follow the pig. And it's really fun to follow the pig. So I would say leave yourself open to that. I've also had it where I'm writing a SAMMY KEYES story and there's a door and Sammy's at the door, but I don't know what's on the other side of the door. Okay, so it wasn't fully plotted out and I didn't know where to go, but my other motto is knock on the door. You will be surprised who opens the door. It's like there is someone on the other side of the door, but you have to knock on it to allow them to open it. So that's part of the writing process. Be open to the unexpected.
Yeah, that I think knocking on the door kind of forces your subconscious to figure out who the heck's on the other side. Right. And your subconscious is really where a lot of the good ideas come from. Okay, so something you don't want to do is take a trip to grandma's house. In the middle of a lot of stories, especially a lot of kind of first drafts, the character goes on some kind of little journey that's not really germane to the fundamental plot. And they visit their grandmother, or the guy goes to a ball game with his dad, or something happens. It's kind of this long rambling journey where they go to a different location, and it doesn't have to do with the central conflict. It doesn't really have to do with the thematic through line of the actual story. So I would say try to avoid those things and focus on the things Wendelin just mentioned, which is kind of bringing your subconscious into play and letting your subconscious kind of figure out what would be the most interesting thing to have happen right now. So you knock on that door and your subconscious will go, oh, let's figure out who's on the other side. That's infinitely more interesting than having your character take a trip to her grandmother's house and have a long conversation over lunch with her grandmother.
And sometimes people will write those, take a trip to grandma's house, and they say, well, it's for character development. But you don't need to go clear to grandma's for character development. If that's the reason you're going there, it doesn't contribute enough to the story to warrant it being there.
That's a good point, because everybody, including me, uses that excuse. Oh, it's there for character development. It really means I wanted to put it in because I kind of like the scene, but it doesn't really further the plot. And we know what to do with that darling, right? Kill it dead.
Okay, sometimes when people are stuck in a story, they will throw in like an artificial crisis, or they'll all of a sudden have a love interest out of nowhere. So those are fine. You can have that crisis, you could have that love story, but you have to seed it in earlier. So you've got to start in the earlier pages establishing that there's some kind of person who could be a love interest in future pages. You can't just suddenly drop in a love interest. You shouldn't. You can, but you shouldn't. And so it also helps with the weaving of your story to avoid the sagging middle if you establish those things earlier on. So if you get the idea for a love interest or for some crisis that's going to happen, that's fine. You can use those, but you have to go back to you should go back to your earlier pages and weave those in for support.
It doesn't mean you have to start over. You're on page 150 and you want to add a love interest. Great. Find a place in chapter 3 where you can mention that she meets some guy that she finds interesting or whatever. And go
or
from
if your
there.
character, all of a sudden, you realize that your character's partner or dad or whatever, if they were a journalist, that would be so handy for you. Well, that's great. But don't introduce that character as being a journalist on page 120. Go back and say they're a journalist earlier on, and then you'll find that thread kind of tends to weave through because you mentioned that several times until you get to the scene where it's important they're a journalist, and it helps with supporting your entire story.
It makes the whole thing much more believable.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so overall, I think you want to adopt the mantra of make your story stronger rather than make your story longer. This is important. What we're not looking for is, oh my God, I know how it started and I know how it ends, and I've got 200 pages in the middle. I don't know what to do. So I need to think of a bunch of stuff to take up time. I need to pad my story. That's the absolute wrong approach, because that will be boring for you to write and that will be boring for the reader to read. You want to think of ways you can make your story stronger by adding conflict, by adding pacing, by adding internal conflict within the character, by adding interiority where we see inside her head and what she's thinking and why she's motivated to do what she does. All those things will make it feel stronger and more real and will make it more emotionally compelling, as opposed to a whole bunch of little events that just happen that don't really tie into the theme of the story, which will slow it down. So think about strength is more important than length.
And our last little tip is one we've shared before, which is read your pages before you go to bed. Let your subconscious do some heavy lifting for you while you're sleeping, because you will be amazed at what problem solving your subconscious will do for you while you're asleep. So whatever pages you've written, or if you're stuck and you don't know where to go, read the last several chapters of what you've written and give your subconscious a chance to work on it while you sleep.
Well, we hope you got something out of this. Like, share, and subscribe, as they say. And hopefully you'll join us next time as we have more coffee with the authors.
Meanwhile, dream big, work hard, don't give up.
Keep writing.
What? I do that?
It's a good clue for you. I'm like
Okay.
a little bird. I'm ducking my head down.
You are. You're like those birds out on the deck. Okay, moving on.